Hi and welcome everybody. My name is Cami Croft. I'm a Deputy Executive Director here at Amnesty International USA, and I want to formally welcome you to our annual Human Rights Conference here in Chicago. Thank you all for being here. I also want to say thanks to the City of Chicago for a warm welcome for making today Amnesty International Day here in the City of Chicago. I'd also like to thank Can TV, who will be live streaming this press conference today and other portions of the conference for anybody who can't be here with us in the room today. You can find that live stream on their website. You may also find it on amnestyusa.org/live. We are thrilled to be here in Chicago at for our annual general meeting this year, and today we have the privilege of engaging a dynamic group of human rights defenders from communities here locally as well as abroad. The individuals that are working day in and day out to make our world a more just place. Together, we are striving to bridge the gap of human rights abuses that are happening globally as well as here right in our backyards. And we're going to talk about some of those that are happening here in Chicago. I'm also honored to have the opportunity to introduce with me today a panel of participants. And following some brief comments, we will have an opportunity to take some questions from those in the audience. And to kick things off, we'll have some comments from my boss, Executive Director Steve Hawkins, who will elaborate on why we're here in Chicago and what bringing human rights home really means. And then we also have several panelists who will share their stories, including Magda Adley, who is a founding member of the El Nadim Center for Management and Rehabilitation of Victims of Violence in Cairo. She's also this year's Janetta Sagan Award winner, recognizing her work on behalf of women's human rights. We also have with us Nathaniel Pendleton, who tragically lost his 15-year-old daughter, Haidia, to gun violence in Chicago 14 months ago. We also have Sarah Clemens, who leads the Junior Newtown Action Alliance and who just arrived from the White House to be with us here today, where she was recognized for her work. We have Joey Mogul, a partner at the People's Law Office, who tirelessly seeks justice for Chicago police torture survivors. And then we have also with us Darryl Cannon, who in November 1983 was tortured into confessing a crime by the Chicago Police Department, and he'll be here to share his story today, as well as Anthony Holmes, who's another torture survivor. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce Steve Hawkins.
Thank you, Cami. And I want to give a thanks to all of the exceptional people sitting with me here today. It is your stories, your courage, and your commitment to stand up for justice that drives organizations like Amnesty to do the work that we do. I'm here representing the U.S. section of Amnesty International, a global movement of over 3 million members that stretches from Nairobi to Bangalore, from Caracas to Hong Kong, and everywhere in between. And here in Chicago, where over the next few days, hundreds of our members from all different backgrounds will come together to learn, to deliberate, and to take action on some of the most pressing human rights issues of our day. Some of our discussions will address issues that affect Americans everywhere, such as mass surveillance, and that subject will be covered by journalist Glenn Greenwald, who will be addressing our members over the weekend. And of course, the CIA torture report was very much part of a focus of ours, and we are pleased that the Senate has agreed to release at least part of the report for declassification by President Obama, but of course Amnesty continues to press for the full declassification of that report. But our theme of this conference is bringing human rights home, and we are here in Chicago, so we'll be spotlighting the human rights abuses as we see them here, including the historical torture by the Chicago police of more than 100 people who are still seeking basic reparations that are due to all torture victims under international human rights law. We will also be talking about the access to education, the treatment of immigrants, and of course, a subject that's particularly close to my heart, and that is gun violence. Next to me is a woman who knows firsthand how much patience, hard work, and determination it takes to achieve the progress that we make in human rights. Magda? Your turn.
Thank you, Stephen and Camille, and good morning, everyone. I think, Camille, thank you. You introduced me, so no need to introduce myself again. Just I wanted to tell that I am here not only as I am the grantee and awarded of Gitana Award, but I am coming here mainly in support of all effort of Amnesty International. Amnesty is one of the most trustful and supporting organization Nadim worked with in the last 2 decades, both in supporting torture victims and in women victims of domestic and sexual violence and trafficking. Amnesty at the same time was in support of Nadim Center when the Egyptian government tried to close it about 10 years back. Also, Amnesty was in support of the lobbying for me, for myself, when I was attacked by the police in an occasion of defending a torture victim in Egypt. So I am here in solidarity with all the work Amnesty is doing and will do. And just I want to tell all that when you work in human rights field, whatever the issue, you will never feel yourself alone. Always there is friends and supporters all over the world. Hundreds of hands are ready to carry you. This is the main lesson that all activists has to know. About the women movement in Egypt and the women's rights, I think some of you at least need to know what is going on. The feminist movement in Egypt lasts to the beginning of 19th. At that time, when we speak about women's rights, about beating of wives, about FGM, all the society and the media was shouting, we are aiming to distract the family, and we are against Islamic rules. Day by day, we succeeded to open all taboos, even marriage in the family, marital rape. It was a taboo till few years back. And after this long time of fighting for women's rights, now in Egypt, there is an article in the new constitution that criminalizes discrimination against women, violence against women. In reality, it is not translated in a specific laws. But I think after the election of the parliament, at the end of this year, we will succeed to pass a new laws to criminalize violence inside the family, sexual violence in public space, pushing more and more empowerment and equality of women in Egypt, and complete our way for accountability and dignity for all the people in Egypt and all over the world. Thank you for inviting us, Amnesty, and thank you for attending, dear media personnel.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Clemens, and I'm here because gun violence turned me into an accidental activist. My mother survived the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School. The gunman happened to turn down the other hallway in the school, and my mother and her class of second graders she hugged close in the coat area of her room were spared. But others we knew were not so lucky. And she always reminds me that 5 children are missing from her class this year, 5 empty seats that should be filled. How can anyone walk away from this threat to the lives of children in the United States today? We all know it could be any school, any neighborhood, any day, anywhere in America, and as we've been reminded this past week, it can even happen twice. I am incredibly humbled to be here today with the father of Hadia Pendleton. I've learned on my journey that many people affected by gun violence walk the same walk, feel the same determination to make change in the face of inertia and fear. Hadia's impressive life, her vibrancy, her love of Latin, her proud participation in the presidential inauguration helped drive us all on, helped drive me on. I often think of how Hadia and I were almost the same age, Mr. Pendleton, and I would have been honored to be her friend. Hearing her story makes me even more determined to continue my work. That Amnesty International is with us now, today, here in Chicago means the world to me, and honors every life lost and every child, every person threatened today by gun violence. That is truly bringing human rights home. I've seen many young people like me turn to activism in the face of the relentless death toll from gun violence. But we need many more, and I hope Amnesty's initiative will fuel the fire. I believe many people are ready to join us on the streets and in the voting booth. By 2020, millennials will make up 40% of potential United States voters. We are the most affected by gun violence, which is the leading cause of death among African American men in this age group, and the second leading cause of death for our generation as a whole. I remain optimistic because since the massacre in my town, I have seen so many people disprove the stereotypes that millennials, that my generation, is lazy and careless. Tomorrow there will be a new generation of voters who will be anything but lazy or careless when it comes to standing strong against gun violence. And whether it spans from Newtown to Chicago, Atlanta to Oakland, California, young people are rising to fight for the right to live in this country in safe communities. Thank you so much.
My name is Nathaniel Pendleton, and I am here to honor my daughter. My wife, she isn't here right now, but she will be here a little bit later to join us. Our precious daughter was murdered in January last year when a gang member fired a bullet intended for a rival gang member. But there were no gang members, just the volleyball team. She was only 15, full of life, talent, and promise. I would have loved to have another reason to be here today, just as I would have loved to have another reason to be sitting next to the First Lady, Michelle Obama, when President Obama addressed gun violence at the State of the Union, or when the First Lady came to mourn our daughter. Today, I am determined, by committing to ending gun violence, to honor the lessons of her life and her death, as painful as that is. She always wanted to make a difference, and she already has. I am determined to make sure that no other child's life is lost in such brutal, senseless way. That is why I'm here today. And I am here with Sarah Clemens of Newtown. You are almost the age of my daughter. Because I believe we are all in the same struggle, we can help each other. Nothing unites communities like the threat of gun violence. And we are here today because we believe that we are stronger when we walk with Amnesty International. From Harsh Park on Chicago's South Side, where my daughter was murdered, to the tragic classrooms of Sandy Hook, to the streets of every American city and everywhere between. Every day, 8 children are killed by bullets in our country. Every day, 32 Americans are murdered with guns, and 140 are treated for gun assaults. Despite that, our members of Congress have failed to pass legislation that seriously tackles our country's gun problem. But that only makes us more determined to pull Congress out of this collective amnesia. We already have the support of millions of Americans who want sensible gun laws. And with Amnesty, we have the support of millions more around the world who want us to find solutions and protect human rights. It's time to widen our movement, not to give in. I believe with Amnesty's help, we are closer. Thank you.
I want to take a moment to thank both Mr. Pendleton and Sarah and Dr. Adley for your comments. And I just wanted to, I had mentioned earlier how gun violence was personal to me, because I remember the first time I ever lost a young person who was a mentee of mine was over 30 years ago now, Jeff Curry in Boston, who was shot to death on a moving school bus at 16 by a young girl his age. So that was the first funeral of a young child I've known who died at the hands of gun violence. It hasn't been my last, and I think of the thousands of children who have died in this country over those 30 years. We know it is a long struggle, and so is the struggle, a long one, to get justice here in Chicago for victims of torture. I'm going to turn it over now to Joey Mogul to address us.
Good morning. My name's Joey Mogul. I am a partner at the People's Law Office, and I am co-founder of the Chicago Torture Justice Memorial Project. And I am so thrilled to be here today, standing alongside Amnesty International. And we are so happy and proud to have Amnesty International step back in and fight for justice for the Chicago police torture survivors. Amnesty International has a long history of supporting torture survivors, both here domestically in the United States, specifically here in Chicago, as well as around the world. Back in 1991, Amnesty International issued a report and called on the city of Chicago to investigate the Chicago police torture cases. And as a result of that request and that investigation, John Burge was subsequently fired by the Chicago Police Department in 1993. We are now glad that Amnesty International is stepping back in to continue to seek justice for the Chicago police torture survivors. Specifically, we have a reparations ordinance in the Chicago City Council where we are seeking financial compensation, psychological counseling, educational and vocational training for the torture survivors and their family members. We are also asking that the city of Chicago make full amends to both the city, to the torture survivors and their family members by officially apologizing for this racist history, and to ensure that we never forget it by both investing in public memorials and a Chicago public school curriculum that remembers this history and this struggle for justice. So we are so proud and so happy to have Amnesty step back into this battle and fight for reparations for the Chicago police torture survivors. We are also heartened by the fact that Amnesty International is going to support Congressman Danny Davis in seeking legislation be passed in Congress known as the Law Enforcement Torture Prevention Act. This is an act that would criminalize acts of torture by law enforcement officials here domestically, and it would ensure that there be no statute of limitations with respect to these crimes of torture. Because as we now know in the Chicago police torture cases, John Burge and the other officers who committed these international human rights violations cannot be prosecuted for their crimes of torture because the statute of limitations is so small. But if Congressman Danny Davis's legislation is passed with the help of Amnesty International, we can send a message that no law enforcement officer is above the law or beyond the long arm of the law. Without further ado, I would like to introduce to you two of my clients who are also my friends and my loved ones. To my right is Darryl Cannon. He is a Chicago police torture survivor. He was tortured in November of 1983 by two of John Burge's right-hand men, John Byrne and Peter Dignan. He was taken to a remote area here in Chicago where he was electrically shocked with a cattle prod. He was hung by his handcuffs, and he was subjected to mock execution in order to force him to confess to a crime he did not commit. And to Mr. Cannon's right is Anthony Holmes. Anthony Holmes is one of the first known Chicago police torture survivors. Anthony was arrested and taken Area 2 Police Headquarters in May of 1973. And he was then tortured directly by John Burge, who handcuffed him around his wrists and his ankles and took the infamous electric shock box and attached the wires to the handcuffs. He then put a plastic bag over Anthony's head, and he repeatedly shocked him and suffocated him several times, forcing Anthony to pass out. And eventually, after the fifth or sixth time of this electrocation and suffocation, Anthony was forced to confess to a murder he did not commit. Please welcome both Darryl Cannon and Anthony Holmes, two of my heroes in this world.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for this forum. Thank you, Amnesty International, for this forum. I'm reminded that in a day or so, Dr. King's assassination will be coming today. Today, I thought it was tomorrow. Anyway, once upon a time, Dr. King did a speech in which he said, justice delayed is justice denied. Here again, it's been a long time in coming for us to be able to have public forums like this here to address the ills that exist here in Chicago, Illinois, dealing with police corruption, dealing with torture, dealing with the judicial system. I did 24 years in prison wrongfully. During that time there, John Burge, Peter Dignan, and all those others that participated in torture had free reign to do whatever they chose to do, while me and my family suffered because of this here. It was a heartbreaking situation that came about, yet justice is beginning to prevail in all of these matters. I have elected, Anthony has elected to be the spokesman for those who are still in prison, who have yet to have a fair hearing before an impartial judge about them having been tortured. So it is my duty, it is Anthony's duty, it is all of our duties to see to it that justice does prevail. It's been long denied for too long now. Now we need to step up. Now we need to be a party to what justice is really about. Amnesty International proved that in the past they have had forums that dealt point blank with the ills of the United States. United States of America has a reputation for talking about atrocities in other countries, but what about here in our own backyard? We need to take responsibility for what has happened in the past, what is happening now. And because of this, it's hard to talk about having been tortured in the manner in which we have been, but yet and still it's necessity. Either we are a part of the problem or we are part of the solution. If you say nothing, then you're a part of the problem. If you address the issue as vigorously as you can, then you become a part of the solution, because people power cannot be denied. We have seen that time and time and time again. So on behalf of myself, Anthony, and those who are still languishing unjustifiably in prison, we say, please continue to stay with us. Please continue to take an active role like Amnesty International is doing to bring this to a full head so that justice can prevail. And I thank you.
As Darrell said earlier, it's hard for us to really speak on this, especially for me, because after so long, I finally got a little justice, because I wouldn't testify against Burge, who had tortured me. But more so is that all the people that's still locked up behind this, and the fact that we couldn't do anything to prevent it. They had a chance to help us, but they didn't, because who we was, where we was from, you know, which it shouldn't have been like that, but it was. I'm not saying all of us is good guys or bad guys. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is, you know, we deserve justice just like anybody else do. For the things they said we did, we didn't do. But still, they felt that we did do it because we was a part of different gangs or whatever. But this is the outcome, and we come up on the streets. So this is why we was like that. But the thing of it is, the sad part is that no matter how hard we try to express our feelings, the hurt that we had, you go to people and tell them, you know, I didn't do this. People torture me. They look at you like, you know, nigga, get on, you know, be point blank. And so we bagged up and shut up. But the sad part of it all is this, is that didn't nobody come to our aid. They covered it up and finally came to the light. And now it's, just, you know, now it's unveiling like it should. I can't speak that good. All I can do is speak what I feel, so bear with me. But the thing, too, is I want to try to express to everybody here, we appreciate y'all being here. We appreciate International Amnesty for coming in and helping us again, because we need this. Myself, I suffer every night, every day. You know, I could have come out and, you know, did some of the birds, that crazy in front of some of the birds. The first thing they would have said was, see, that's what he is. You know, he'll kill or whatever. But it wasn't like that. We didn't do nothing like that. We didn't even think like that. But the sad part is that they still look at us like, you know, we some kind of leftovers. You know, but we ain't not leftovers. You know, we ain't forgotten. You know, we stand as tall as we can. Our families done suffered. You know, some of us, you know, we didn't get a chance to go to mothers' funerals, fathers' funerals, sisters and brothers. You know, I was lucky enough to have my daughter. I came home when my daughter, she passed, but I had some time with her. But if I had been still confined, I wouldn't have had that opportunity. And so these are the things we're missing. You know, can't nobody get these back to us. Can't no amount of money, can't no amount of help. They can't do nothing about that. The only thing we can do now is, what y'all can do is help us get this situation situated and straightened out as best you can, because it's a whole lot of us like that. So I thank you, and I appreciate y'all helping us and inviting us to this forum, and God bless you.
So with that, we just hope that you will join us in the rally that Amnesty International and the Chicago Torture Justice Memorial Project is hosting right after this press conference. There'll be a march over to Daley Plaza, where we will then rally in support of the reparations ordinance in Chicago City Council. Thank you again, Amnesty.
We now have a chance to take some questions. Are there any questions in the room? Then I'm going to turn it to, oh, go ahead. Can you please just state your name and address the question to the individual you'd like to answer?
I'm Lee Edwards with the Chicago Citizen newspaper, and I thank you all for attending today. The question I have for all of you, particularly one featuring gun violence, is what is the ripple effect for those who have not experienced gun violence in their personal lives? We hear about it through different media outlets, but for someone who has not experienced that, how does that internally affect not only yourself, but everyone around you and the community at large?
I'll comment on that. The ripple effect is pretty much sooner or later it affects you. It affects you through a friend. It affects you through a family member. The effects go really deep. Even before my daughter was subject to gun violence, and she lost her life, I've had many friends that's passed, family members that's passed because of gun violence. And it hurts. It hurts a little bit. But when it happens to someone so close to you, that's when it really wakes you up. It shakes you, and it wakes you up. So like I've said so many times before, don't wait on it. Don't wait on it to come to your doorstep, because when you have an opportunity, when everyone is speaking out against it now, you have an opportunity to say something, to do something, to Just get yourself involved to talk to a kid. Maybe you could prevent it. Maybe just that 1 second that you spent with that kid, talking to that kid, prevented him from going out and doing something stupid, or prevented him from going out and being a victim.
I would second what Mr. Pendleton said, and I would also like to say that my generation, young people, feel that ripple effect the most when gun violence does occur. More than half of gun deaths in this country are of people under the age of 30. Those are future spouses and friends. Those, one of those individuals could have cured cancer, or, found a new patent or a new invention that could have saved lives. These are lives, and these are dreams, and these are hopes. These are new families and new employees that are just being lost for no reason. And when I think about I'm going to college next year, when I think about, who's going to be my roommate next year, who are the friends that I'm going to make, I could be losing those friends as we speak to gun violence, to senseless violence. And it is happening in every community around the country. Like Mr. Pendleton said, I unfortunately did wait until it came to my doorstep. I remember hearing about the Aurora mass shooting 5 months before the shooting at Sandy Hook, and I remember crying for those families with my mother, and then 5 months later I was crying with my mother because she survived. I remember hearing about day-to-day shootings that happened in towns next to me in Hartford or in Bridgeport, Connecticut, and I did nothing, and I turned my back. And Americans just can't do that anymore. The time was yesterday. The time was last year and the year before that. The time was after Hadia was shot. The time was after my former elementary school was bombarded. Time is now, and we can't, Americans, like Mr. Pendleton said, you can't wait for the voice of a loved one to be lost before you raise your own.
Are there any other questions? Oh, go ahead.
This is for the victims of Chicago's police violence, particularly working throughout the...
Can you just repeat? Thank you.
Once again, this is for the victims of Chicago's police violence and working to end that cause. When you're doing your work and you're out in the community, what is it like to tell your story to people, again, who have not experienced that, have no idea, and do not believe the story? How do you relate the story to people who are unaware of what's going on?
You simply speak your mind. That's the best way. I have no pre-written script. What happened to Darryl Cannon is here in my mind and here in my heart. And yes, sometimes it's shocking to hear that you did 24 years straight in prison. And with the last 9 years of those 24 years was in TAM's Supermax, where you have no communication with anyone. So it's not hard to get people to vision mentally what has happened to you. But what is hard is getting people to thoroughly get involved with trying to change conditions where it no longer happens again. Since being home from prison, I've been a worker within the ceasefire organization. I've been a supervisor at that. And I was placed in an area that they call Chirac, where it come from, the south side of Chicago, the Woodlawn area. And during my tenure as the supervisor for that area, we went 10 months without a single fatality. That's because of the fact that I'm from the streets and I understand the violence that occurs there, the things that you see there on a daily basis will boggle the mind as some of these youngsters, how they care less about human life until they're either one of two things. Either they themselves are shot or they're arrested for having killed someone. Now reality sets in. You know, so I've been on all sides of the fence, so it's very easy for me to open my mouth and tell you what I feel, tell you what I've seen, tell you what I think. And once again, it's up to the people to accept or reject. And nowadays, people are beginning to accept more and more the realities that we do not live in a perfect world, that atrocities have been committed right here in Chicago, Illinois, by the Chicago Police Department. And the proof can go even further back. All you got to do is go to the archives of the news reporters and look at 1968 Democratic Convention. The police went berserk in beating people because of the fact that they got the right to protest. You know, so again, it's not hard for people to come to grips once you put the picture in front of them to see.
Let me just also say, I've had the great pleasure to both speak with Darrell and Anthony on countless numbers of occasions, and I think everyone who hears their stories has no doubt that they suffered the most excruciating physical torture. That said, at this point, 40 years later from when Burge's reign of terror began, we have overwhelming evidence that absolutely establishes beyond any reasonable doubt that is further confirmed by Burge's conviction that this pattern and practice of racist torture occurred. We are past the point of questioning whether this occurred or not. It did. We are now at the point where we have to say, what are we going to do right by the torture survivors? And how, as we as a city, are going to take responsibility and make amends in an attempt to make them as whole as possible.
And if it had not occurred, why would they bring me back to court and drop all charges against me after 24 years, after having a sentence of natural life? So the proof is there. Make no mistakes about that.
So, today, Anthony, you had said something about not speaking so good, but speaking how you feel. And speaking what you feel, and for every one of you, speaking what you feel today is so powerful. And I want to thank you for doing that today and telling your stories. And as we close today, I just want to hand it over again to my boss, Stephen Hawkins, to speak a little bit more about bringing human rights home here to Chicago.
Thank you, Cami. I just want to close by thanking all of the panelists, reminding folks that we will be here for the next few days talking about torture in Chicago, gun violence, range of issues impacting not only the United States but the world community. I want to close by noting something that was in the paper today, and that is that Amnesty International, as I mentioned early, is a worldwide movement. And from time to time, as part of the work of our 60 sections around the world, we take up issues for consultation, for discussion. One of those issues that is in the midst of conversation right now is around the decriminalization, the pros and cons of decriminalization, whether it's the purchaser or the purchased in the sex trade. That is a issue that Amnesty is consulting all of its sections on, and we're involved in that discussion here in the United States. I invited the Attorney General, Lisa Madigan, and others to a breakfast this morning with our board that I thought was a very productive conversation. We've been having discussions like that around the country, and Amnesty's been having discussions like that around the world. I thought it was very productive. It is the type of, I think, rich engagement that Amnesty always seeks to have. There will be a demonstration later on here today. I never think those are as productive as sitting down and having conversation. So I certainly welcomed the fact that the Attorney General accepted our invitation to sit down today. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, and I hope that you join us for the action right after this.